I know that it's a bit of an older clip, but daggone it, it's becoming more and more relevant.
You might think, that Hispanic voters might be the types of folks who would have a backlash against Donald Trump's remarks, right? Ain't the case. If you ask Hispanic voters who do they trust more on border security and immigration, overwhelmingly they trust Donald Trump more by a tremendous margin. Look at that, 49% to 24%. And that is in line with what we're seeing in the polls in general amongst Hispanics, right? Joe Biden won them overwhelmingly back in 2021 and by over 20 percentage points. Democrats normally carry them overwhelmingly. If you look at the polling right now and an average of polling amongst Hispanic voters, who did they choose in the ballot test? It's barely Biden by about 2 points. It would be the smallest margin for any Democratic candidate among Hispanic voters basically throughout history since we started polling the gosh darn thing. So the fact is, at this point, there's no backlash, and at this point, I don't see one.
Before I tell you guys why it is that Hispanics are turning to the Republican Party, and before we get to this very, very long, detailed video, I think it's time that we play a little montage before we go any further of the media trying to spin this, or at least acting like they're baffled about what's going on.
Does it sound like me? That's what he's looking for. So, when people are something, they're not asking for your papers. They're just anti that.
It's been seen as racist and bigoted. They said they don't have a problem with that. They view his actions over his words in terms of what they feel he can do for their community. Again, the economy, those pocketbook issues over and over again, top of the list.
It's important to hear from those voters. I'm glad you were there.
People are getting desperate, too. That brings the crime up. When you get poverty and you get a bunch of people that come here that get actually more benefits than the people that been here, then what?
This is real America. This right here, people are paying 30, 40% more. We were just going to buy Windex to clean the windshield. Everything is expensive. Everybody is hurting. People need to see that their leader cares about them. And Donald Trump does care about them. And that's why he's coming here.
Why do you want to see Donald Trump tomorrow?
Because Donald Trump is the man. Everybody wants to see that.
And we keep wondering why these young people aren't coming home to the Democrats, or why blacks are not coming home to the Democrats. Because Democratic messaging is full of shit. That's
Jim
why.
Acosta and MSNBC bit will be coming up a little bit later on this video, but obviously we got a lot to talk about, so make sure you guys stick around. But before we get started, let me go ahead and say this. Before we talk about the reasons why it is that Hispanics are hopping to the Trump camp, or at least hopping aboard the Trump train, I want to go ahead and say this before we get started. Happy Memorial Day to everyone out there. Please remember that, and I understand that this video is coming out on Tuesday, the day after Memorial Day, but obviously I hope you guys were safe this weekend. I meant to get this message out before Memorial Day weekend started, but obviously things get a little bit hectic, and of course here we are now, and here I am actually recording this video on Memorial Day itself. Also, something else too about Memorial Day. This right here is the day that we use to honor those who actually passed away or died in service of this nation. Meaning that these are men and women who died during war training. They died while serving you guys, the people. Me, of course, being a veteran, Veterans Day is reserved for people like myself, the ones who gave some, but obviously did not give all. So remember that this day right here is actually for those who gave all. Now, with that right there being said, let's go ahead and jump into this video. Now, I know that it's been a few days since the former president's rally in the Bronx, and I want to go ahead and say this before we get started. Before you come in here and think to yourself that I'm just some delusional guy who thinks that former President Donald Trump can flip Bronx, New York, I want you guys to know right now that that would actually be delusional, because the Bronx voted for Biden at I'll put it this way here, he won it by 66%. He overwhelmingly won pretty much all of New York City. And he, of course, as a result of that, he ended up winning the state of New York. And more than likely, it won't flip. However, the fact that the Bronx, which is really, to tell you the truth, quite minority laden, meaning that you have a lot of Hispanics, you have a lot of black people, you have a lot of people who come from other nations that live in the Bronx, also a lot of ancestral ties to other nations as well, you would probably think to yourself that there is no way in the world he's going to do better when it comes to this particular area. However, this video is about why Trump is doing better with Hispanics as a whole. And of course, it reminds me of two separate things. Now, before we get down and dirty into this video, there are a lot of people who looked at the actual rally size and they said this is not as big of a rally as people are claiming that it is, at least as far as the Trump team is concerned. However, there's actually a permit that was actually on the rally itself that said only a certain amount of people could actually be within the rally area itself. And of course, there were more people there in the overflow in the park itself actually walking by. were actually listening to the speech. So what does this actually mean? Why is this so significant? Well, it makes me think about a certain clip that went viral back in 2020 involving Pitbull on the Revolt podcast. Now, obviously, I can't play the full thing for you, but obviously, in preparation for this video that I'm doing now, I wanted to go back and re-listen to the actual podcast episode, especially given the fact that you can't just find the clip where he talked about 2020. You actually got to listen to the full podcast, and it's roughly an hour and a half into it, where he actually talks about some of the things that would send Hispanics to the Republican Party, or at least away from the Democratic Party. Let me play a small snippet of that for you guys, so that way you guys can see where we're going at with this.
Are we talking about a virus? A virus? That when we talk about SARS, MERS, bird, swine, Ebola, now Corona. Like, come on, folks. I mean, you gotta read the devil's in the details. And with that said is, if you look at the recovery numbers on what we're talking about, I don't know what it is, but I guess the flu went on vacation on this year. Heart attacks went on vacation this year. Everything went on vacation this year when it came to, I'm talking about, what we're going through right now. Okay. And let's just call a spade a spade. And the reason I can have this conversation is because my family comes from communism. They fled communism. They had everything taken away from them. Everybody got murdered. Everybody got killed. And that's the reason me, being a first-generation Cuban-American, or maybe us, being first-generation Cuban-Americans, I look at freedom and I appreciate that. I appreciate opportunity. I appreciate anything that you give me. All I need is a little slip, partner, and I got you. And that comes from the fact that when Castro took over everything, and I'm looking at what's going on right now, the only person here that's hot, 38 hot. It's Castro. He's going, y'all did it with a virus?
A Cuban American who's not really into politics, and you may even remember the actual clip, which, by the way, you guys just saw about 50 some odd seconds of it, which I had to get from the Daily Wire, because as I said before, you got to listen to the full podcast to actually get that clip and the rest of it to see what's actually going on. And I went back and re-listened to the whole thing this morning in preparation for this video here, and guess what? It's actually a pretty daggone good interview once you get beyond the first 25 to 30 minutes. A lot of things are actually said in there that kind of gives you the impression there's this thing called gatekeeper, stuff like that there, and it's one of the biggest reasons why it is that people were trying to break away and go independent. That is a separate topic altogether, but let's just say I've been red-pilled a little bit further and further on the music industry, and of course there'll be videos out of as part of the media criticisms in the future. The thing is this right here. Pitbull's parents were obviously ancestral Cuban generations. Now, I want you to think about this really quick. The Bronx, you have a lot of Dominicans, you have a lot of Puerto Ricans, you have a lot of people who are from Nicaragua, Panama, who are from South America, and some of these regimes that these people lived under were pretty daggone brutal. Pretty daggone brutal, meaning that they were communistic, fascistic, and of course, right now there's a correlation with the current Democratic Party. So when you actually think about it, it's very possible that the former president's Hispanic support is actually increasing mostly amongst those groups. However, it's not as simple as you think. I did a video a while back talking about one-party rule. I'm going to have to go back and change the title of that video and basically put down why it was that one-party rule was actually a pipe dream. I advise you guys to go check out the video. For some odd reason, it didn't perform very well. I thought it was going to, but only got like 32 views. But I advise you guys to go check it out because in reality, one-party rule for the Democratic Party is actually quite counterproductive. Yeah, the Hispanics coming across the border will, in fact, vote Democrat the first time around being here in the nation, but slowly but surely with the current Democratic Party being as loony as it is and as fascistic as it is, as communistic as it is, as crazy as it is, especially given the alphabet agenda and all the other stuff, after a while these people would lose favor with the Democratic Party and they would choose to select the more conservative party of the bunch. But that's another topic for another day. Let's get back on track. Who shall we start with? Well, let's start with MSNBC.
Counterintuitive, but I did talk to folks in that crowd who themselves were immigrants. A lot of folks from the Dominican Republic. A lot of people that I talked to were born and raised in the Bronx. For some of them, this was their first ever Trump event. And when you talk to immigrants that are going to these Trump rallies, they agree with his message on immigration. Their point is, look, I did it the right way. I came here legally, and especially those living in New York right now, the sentiment I heard from a lot of voters was, we have these immigrants right now that the city is taking taken care of in a way that I've never felt taken care of by this city. It was a large crowd and a diverse crowd. Yes, there were some people from Westchester, from New Jersey, but there were a lot of people there that were from the Bronx, Black and Latino voters that are sick of how much they're paying for gas and groceries, that are frustrated with the situation at the border. And
so never mind crime, never mind the lax crime that's going on right now, especially in New York City, especially given the fact that, let's just say that the very, very weak DA Alvin Bragg is just allowing crime to just go absolutely crazy. That's definitely got something to do with it. Oh, the rampant inflation has got to do with it. And something else, too, that, by the way, is going to come up a little bit later on in this video is the fact that you've also got a lot of Mexican Americans who had to go through the process of immigration to get their citizenship, and now they are seeing a bunch of people come across the border, and of course those people coming across the border are basically getting first serve access, meaning that they're practically getting all the benefits that these people who've been waiting in the country for a very, very long time have not received. That, by the way, also came up a little bit in that little segment too, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. As I said before, it's going to be a relatively lengthy one. But what about Jim Acosta, CNN? What about Ana Navarro? You know, the woman who claims that she's a Republican, but yet she sides with the Democratic Party on everything. And of course, let's just go ahead and say it. She's practically a daggone lib. Let's just roll this.
I mean, you and I have talked about this many times about his rhetoric, the rhetoric he uses to talk about migrants and so on. And I just have to ask you, Anna, I mean, when you look at the poll numbers, and you see, if you break out the demographics, Trump is doing better among Latinos. He is doing better among African-American voters. And it certainly is a threat to the president's reelection campaign. Is there I mean, what do you make of this disconnect?
Well, a few things. One is, I think America has a little bit of amnesia when it comes to Donald Trump.
The rhetoric will be coming up here in a second because we got to talk about said rhetoric, okay? But the thing that I want to go ahead and point out is the whole thing where Anna, she basically said that America's got amnesia. Well, apparently not, because apparently people remember the first 3 years of the Trump administration, the economy being really good. They also remember the fact that we weren't at war. By the way, Hispanic kids, they also get plucked for combat too. I just figured I'd point that out.
And frankly, being in a courtroom for the last 20 days, I think has helped him because he's not been out in rallies saying the stupid stuff he says and the incendiary, outrageous things he says on a daily basis. We've been focusing on Michael Cohen. We've been focusing on Stormy Daniels. We haven't been focusing on the things that Donald Trump says.
I'll get the Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen stuff here in a second because there really is a whole lot to explain because it's actually quite simple. Now, really quick, I just said this actually quite simple, but in reality, and this is going to sound very, very weird, it's kind of complicated, meaning because it's actually two separate subgroups that we're going to be discussing, especially when it comes to Hispanics, which, by the way, you could argue that that's being kind of monolithic, but the reason why I'm saying two separate subgroups, it's really three, because, once again, I screwed that up. I'm talking about those who live in the Caribbean area or come from the Caribbean area, that right there being Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and of course those who come from Central and South America, which we'll talk about here momentarily because you can kind of almost put those two together. But of course those south of the border in Mexico as well. There's actually a lot going on here, and it is kind of complicated, but when you actually break it all down, it's actually quite simple. Like I said, this is going to be kind of a tough video to do. It's got to be very, very detail-oriented. Of course, we're going to be going back to the previous clip that we talked about earlier. But the fact of the matter is this right here. Ana Navarro, it's almost like when liberals or when Republicans or conservatives suddenly decide to become liberals, it's like their brains completely melt away. It's like it just completely just something just happens to them. I have no idea what it is. I will give her credit for losing a lot of weight. But remember, this is also the same woman who said that her brother, her older brother, would be a situation where abortion would have been warranted because he has a, let's just say he's mentally deficient. I think that is the right way to say it because you can't actually say the other R word here on this platform anymore without actually getting demonetized. But getting back on topic, the Stormy Daniels situation, okay, the Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen situation, a lot of people are looking at that and they're saying to themselves, so Donald Trump paid a woman $130,000 who had to be a porn star after he had sex with her to keep her mouth closed, not say anything. It sounds like a guy just simply paying for a prostitute because let's just go ahead and be honest, porn stars screw on camera for money. And seeing how it is that particular case, a lot of things have came out in that case that actually makes Michael Cohen look like the guilty party. It's a lot to explain. But there's a reason why it is that the mainstream media is now not confident about there being a guilty verdict in that case, and it more than likely turning into a, I don't know, hung jury. And I didn't say this right before, but I kind of touched on it, but I didn't finish it up. I didn't actually I didn't actually do very well in the follow through. But the world right now is absolutely burning alive. You've got a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. You've got a war going on in the Middle East, the Gaza Strip. And of course, now you've got China and Taiwan once again saber rallying. And speaking of South America, you recently had an incident where it looked like Venezuela was going to invade Guyana. It seems to me like a lot of people immediately regretted their vote after Biden got in office. And I kind of warned about this back in 2021 that he was going to be as bad as what he is. I just kept simply saying the phrase that they screw up the screw up. That's the real truth of it. Cite the whole Truth Commission with the whole Nina Jankowicz woman and how that was actually a thing for about 2 weeks, and they chose to shut it down because guess what? Everybody in the Biden administration is what? A flunky. The mainstream media, of course, screwed up big time by basically telling everybody that Donald Trump was going to be going to prison when it looks more and more likely that he probably won't be pulling a day. And of course, even if he was arrested or locked up, more than likely he would be doing his time at one of his homes with the Secret Service around, because you're not going to be able to lock those guys up there with him for life. Hence, one of the reasons why it was they tried to impeach him the second time to get a conviction, so that way they could remove the Secret Service detail, but that's a different topic altogether. Let's get back on point. Media has a massive disconnect with Hispanics. They automatically assume that every single Hispanic is, how do I say this? They automatically assume that they're all the same, which is obviously not true, not the case. Now look, I'm from the southeastern United States. I'm from the state of North Carolina. Most of the Hispanics I was around were Mexican, okay? Mexican Americans. A lot of them came over. I'm not going to get the whole illegal. I mean, I've done several videos on the border crisis, okay? And you guys know how I feel if you've watched those videos. We need a border wall. We also need much better vetting. We also need to fix the immigration process, and we don't need to be allowing illegals, especially at this moment in time, especially given the fact that we now know what the real reasons are for the migrants being over here. They're being here to replace an entire voting group, and no, it's not the white one. Just simply saying, I've done a lot of videos on this topic. I'll try to leave some in the description box, as well as the one that I did on the one-party rule, and I should probably change the name to why it's actually counterproductive. The point is this right here. The media has this massive disconnect with Hispanic voters, and they're kind of wondering why that's the case, why it is we're having this disconnect. Well, the reason why there's this massive disconnect with Hispanic voters is because the Democratic Party and, to a certain extent, the establishment GOP, they think that Hispanic voters are ignorant. Cite this old clip that I had from said one-party rule video that I'm going to be playing for you guys.
Él es nacionalista y quiere que este país esté bien. Aquí nacieron mis hijos y quiero que mis hijos estén bien.
¿Y por qué más? Why else?
No votaría por Joe Biden por este motivo. Joe Biden tiene al país hecho un desastre económicamente.
What would you tell Democrats who think that all immigrants are going to be on their side?
Dejen de pensar que los inmigrantes somos ignorantes. Los demócratas son la monja bondadosa que te encuentras en la calle, que te dice que te va a ayudar, pero cuando tiene el poder para hacerlo, se le olvida la promesa que te hizo.
Y para los republicanos,
that man is 100% correct. Democrats oftentimes forget their promises the minute they get into office. Now, this guy right here was a Mexican immigrant that we're going to be discussing here in a second, especially when we get to the whole complicated section of this video, because obviously you got to break it down a little bit further, and I'm going to be doing that here momentarily. But the fact of the matter is that most Mexican Americans know that the country was obviously better off under former President Trump. Now, what about the migrant issue? We'll go back to the MSNBC clip. You're getting a lot of people who are coming over at this moment in time, and they're basically getting the special service from the federal government, even though there's obviously a migrant crisis going on in these very, very big blue cities, which all claim to be sanctuary cities, and said bring them all in. But of course, we all know it's obviously for political convenience, which is exactly what's going on in this next clip.
Dejen ya de ser la monja diabólica que anda aterrorizando a nuestra comunidad inmigrante. No somos criminales, somos personas buenas que venimos a trabajar buscando una mejor vida. Los republicanos nos utilizan como la piñata electoral. Ellos tienen la culpa de todos, son los culpables de las violaciones, son los culpables del consumo de drogas. Pero es una gran mentira.
He says he wants Donald Trump to win. ¿Por qué quiere que gane Donald Trump? Why?
Él es racista y claro que no me gusta que sea racista. Y claro que no me gusta la retórica antimigrante de Donald Trump, pero finalmente, al final, es pura politiquería. Algunos me van a juzgar, oye, es que tú quieres que gane Donald Trump. Pues es que es nacionalista, por eso quiero que gane. Y los nacionalistas aman.
My man is saying exactly what the vast majority of Mexican Americans here, or Mexican immigrants that are here at this moment in time, are saying. These people who are coming over, they are getting benefits that, quite frankly, we did not get. Trump may be this, Trump may be that there, but at least he's a nationalist. He cares about the country that he's in. You people think that we are ignorant. You people think we are dumb. You think we are going to support you regardless. We know the country was better off under former President Trump. We know that job opportunities were better off under former President Trump. We know that our dollars could actually stretch a little bit further under former President Trump. Everything that he says is just, quite frankly, rhetoric. We had 4 years to deal with this. And as a matter of fact, the truth be told is if you actually look at the Hispanic voting bloc that voted for Trump, you will find out that it was mostly Cuban Americans, Puerto Ricans. You will find out that Mexican Americans were the ones who voted for Trump the least. However, that number is improving, and it started to improve when Trump was in office, when he was calling for the border to be closed. Most of these Hispanics did not take his rhetoric seriously back in 2016. A lot of them were actually offended by some of the rhetoric, and they did not go vote for him. Where in 2020, if you actually look at the numbers, mostly border Hispanics, and there was a border issue, they chose to actually vote for Trump, and now more and more Mexican immigrants and Mexican Americans have actually woken up and saying that Trump was in fact a much better president, and the country was obviously much better off, and therefore their kids, their family, whatnot were much better off. But Democrats, of course, continue to run the whole shtick of everybody's welcome to come here. Don't you want to see your brother? Don't you want to see your sister? Don't you want to see your cousin? Don't you want to see this person? Yeah, they would love to see them, but they would love to see him come here legally and not get benefits ahead of them. That right there is what the hell is going on with this. And I said this was going to be a problem. It was going to create a lot of jealousy at some point in time and a lot of friction. And with that there, obviously Mexican Americans and Mexican immigrants who are trying to go through the process to get legalized, they're obviously feeling the brunt of this, and they're obviously not okay with it. But what about the other Hispanics I was talking about? Well, here's the thing. It's funny that I've actually got to give the man credit for this, but the current administration, the current president on the campaign trail back in 2020, when he was having this conversation, I think with Charlemagne the God, he talked about Hispanic Americans and said that they weren't a monolith. Well, he's not wrong. Several countries in South America, Central America, are in fact countries. It's not just one country. To Democrat voters, they believe everybody who's Hispanic is Mexican, and that's obviously not true. You've got Cubans, you've got people from Panama, you got people from Nicaragua, Guatemala. The list goes on and on and on. Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Ecuador. Obviously, the countries I've been mentioning, and more. There's obviously a lot more people who come from a lot more countries that are classified as Hispanic or Latino. They see what's going on with the whole Stormy Daniels situation, and they're saying, what's the crime? You see, to these people, they feel that this right here is more of a freedom issue. Let me go back to that clip, okay? Let me go back to that clip I played earlier, that pit bull, which I had to pull from the Daily Wire. Let me just play it one more time.
The reason I can have this conversation because my family comes from communism. They fled communism. They had everything taken away from them. Everybody got murdered. Everybody got killed. And that's the reason me, being a first-generation Cuban-American, or maybe us, being first-generation Cuban-Americans, I look at freedom and I appreciate that. I appreciate opportunity. I appreciate anything that you give me. All I need is a little slip, partner, and I got you. And that comes from the fact that when Castro took over everything, and I'm looking at what's going on right now, the only person here that's hot, 38 hot, is Castro. He's going, y'all did it with a virus?
You see, to Mexican migrants and Mexican Americans, work is valued a little bit more. But to those from, say, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, et cetera, freedom is valued a little bit more. They don't even understand what the crime is. So you pay for a prostitute, basically. Look, let me put it this way here. People from certain backgrounds obviously value certain things a little bit more than others. It was a video that I came across a long time ago from the Aristocratic Utensil. You guys might want to check this guy out. He's actually very good. I always try to endorse this guy every chance I get because everything that comes out of this guy's mouth is 100% true. He was talking about another YouTuber who is from Eastern Europe, whose lineage goes back to Eastern Europe, and his family lived under the Iron Curtain. Freedom, the freedom to choose, the freedom for opportunities. Those types of freedoms are going to be, how do I say, a little bit more valued to certain people. Let's play a little bit more.
Y'all took over the world with a virus? Y'all gotta be kidding me. He had missiles pointed to the United States of America during the Russian missile crisis, during the Bay of Pigs and what they went on through. So this shit gets deep. The only thing is do you want to realize how deep it is? You know, killed. And that's the reason me being a first generation Cuban American, or maybe us being first generation Cuban Americans, I look at freedom and I appreciate that shit. I appreciate opportunity. I appreciate anything that you give me. All I need is a little slip, partner, and I got you. And that comes from the fact that when a Castro took over everything, and I'm looking at what's going on, do segment travel, what we gonna do, segment, what we gonna do when it comes to online. And it said, if anybody is not a part of the narrative, we're gonna take it off online, which to me smells like communism. Right. You feel me? And obviously that's what our families live through, and I'm sure all of our families have similar stories.
And when somebody hears tell that some people are going to be silenced and people who don't go along with the narrative, and of course, when you've got your ancestral roots that go back to a country that was ran by a communist dictator, or like in South America, these extreme socialists and very, very hardcore, how do I say, fascistic countries and some of these regimes, obviously the people who have these types of roots back, or these ancestral roots back to those nations with family members who lived under extremely totalitarian, extremely tyrannical regimes, obviously you're going to value freedom a little bit more. It's not just the whole point about jobs. It's not just the whole point about inflation. It's also got to do with freedom too. And that right there is the real reason why it is that former President Trump is doing so well with Hispanics. These mitwits in the mainstream media don't seem to understand it. A lot of this is because the vast majority of them live in the very, very wealthy side of town. They don't actually have conversations with people. They don't actually see what's actually on people's minds. So if you ask me if Trump's going to do better with Hispanics this cycle, yes, he's going to do a lot better with Hispanics this cycle. And guess who the hell is actually making that happen? You people in the mainstream media and the Biden administration. Go back to what Ana Navarro said. I didn't mention this earlier, but when she said he's in the courtroom talking about, we're talking about Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels. You do realize that nobody in this nation actually cares about that case except for the most hardcore lefties and most hardcore never-Trumpers. What I'm saying to you is that people really and truly don't care about that case. They view it as a stupid one. 2 years outside the state statute of limitations, the girl is actually a prostitute, a porn star. Nobody cares about that. They view this entire situation as malicious, and they view it as the federal government basically throwing their hands down, throwing their fist down at somebody just to be doing it. Go back and look at the trials back in the days of Stalin, the purges and whatnot. Look at what people went through, the kangaroo courts. That's what it looks like to these people here. Also, by the way, the same kangaroo court crap also happened in Latin America, especially in Cuba. So you can obviously see right then and there that these Cuban Americans, these Dominican Americans, these Puerto Rican Americans, these Venezuelan Americans, these Colombian Americans, these Americans that, quite frankly, or these Hispanic Americans who have lineages back to South America and to Central America, especially if you're Nicaraguan or Panamanian, guess what? They see this crap and they think to themselves, oh my God, my freedom is being lost. I think I'm going to go vote for the guy who's a little bit more pro-freedom than the current regime that's trying to stomp on people, while at the same time giving benefits to those who, quite frankly, shouldn't be here. I'm just simply saying that they're looking at this and they're saying to themselves, these people are hopping the line, they shouldn't be here. We're actual Americans. We've been here a lot longer. We've actually been working to actually achieve the quote-unquote American dream. And right now we have a administration that's going out of their way to take away our freedoms for just simply speaking up and saying the truth. And at the same time, they're also trying to prosecute a guy who was once president, and they're trying to lock him up in a very, very communistic way. I think that right there is the real reason why it is that the former president's doing a lot better with Hispanics. And also to go on top of that, as we get deeper into the summer and closer to the election, I'm pretty sure that Trump's numbers are actually going to increase in that category. But tell me what you guys think. I really truly want to hear what you guys think about this matter. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please share the video. Please sign up in the comment section. I know it was a relatively lengthy, convoluted video. I hope you guys were safe this past weekend. And also to go on top of that, please remember what Memorial Day is for. But once again, though, please tell me what you think. Please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign off in the comment section, and I'll see you guys later.